So today Games Workshop confirmed that a new Tau Codex is indeed coming. The advanced forces of the greater good will be getting a much needed boost in early 2022. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Tau, the news of a new codex unveiled by Games Workshop, and what sort of changes it might bring for the faction. There certainly was something that we were already rumoured to be getting, but Games Workshop just kind of confirmed it in a throwaway offhand article. I'm sure we'll be hearing much more nearer the time. Basically, the confirmation comes from a Warhammer community article regarding Kill Team Chalnath, the versus box between Tau Pathfinders and Sisters of Battle Novitiates. The Sisters have some nice shiny new rules that we'll be going over shortly, but when they came to talk about the Tau section of the box, they're saying that they aren't getting any new rules for the Pathfinders at the moment, but they'll be present in the new codex, which will be coming early 2022. The exact phrase that they used was one of the first new codexes in 2022, so it's not absolutely guaranteed that it will be the next one, but I'd say that there's a very good chance. As we already know, Games Workshop have said that there will be a Xenos and an Imperial codex in December. That big rumoured release schedule says that the Imperial one will be Custodes, and the Xenos one will be Genestealer cults, and that has kind of been backed up somewhat already by that leaked picture of the Custodes Lieutenant model. If the leaked reveal schedule does continue to be quite as accurate as it has been, then they said that the next one will be January, and that will be Tau, though it wouldn't exactly be the biggest release in terms of new miniatures. There would just be the upgraded Pathfinder sprue that we've already got, and then a resculpted character for Darkstrider, the Tau Sept character that you can see here on the right. That does seem quite believable to me. For the majority of Codex releases in 9th edition, there have either been a quite big model drop, or it's usually just been one additional new character. We've had Lilith Hesperax for the Drakari, the Skitarii Marshal for the Abmech, and Castellan Crow for the Grey Knights. Darkstrider does feel like a character akin to that kind of level, and to be honest could fit in quite well with some slightly upgraded Pathfinders as well, as he basically is a Pathfinder character. Not a terrible idea to say goodbye to one more Finecast kit as well, and get it resculpted in nice new plastic. I'd say out of miniatures for the Tau Codex, Darkstrider might not be the most essential of them. I'm sure he could be very powerful with some nice new rules, but I feel like there's plenty of other kits in the Tau range that might have been better to update earlier, perhaps other Finecast kits like Vespid or Sniper drones in particular. I think they'd certainly be decent candidates. Currently Darkstrider is Tau Sept locked as well, which might make him a little bit less helpful for other armies, say perhaps if you're mustering a force from the Farsight Enclaves, and maybe having a Sept locked character isn't the ideal choice in terms of having wide appeal. I suppose there's every chance he might get some sort of rule that allows him to be taken in different armies, perhaps like Typhus for example from the Death Guard. Personally, I do feel that it's a pretty good news that Tau are getting a tune-up. As it goes, Tau are one of the weakest factions in 9th edition, and have been since the new rules came out. I think the main issue was having really quite a lot of shooting units, a lot of which received some fairly decent points hikes when the edition changed, and basically the new missions being the absolute opposite of how Tau wanted to be scoring in 8th. Typically the way that Tau played in 8th edition was maybe kind of a little boring. The majority of Tau armies that I saw throughout 8th edition usually tended to be a massive gunline castle, clustered hammerhead tanks, riptide battlesuits or broadsides, dealing out a fairly unholy amount of firepower. Generally the game will be a fair few turns of them just shooting everything dead, and then hopefully moving up onto the objectives once the foe has been laid to rest. In 9th edition they can't really do that. The ways that the primary and secondary missions work generally mean that you have to be moving forward and taking the centre ground at least from fairly early on. In particular, I think that Tau struggle on primaries without units that are particularly durable to hold the midfield, and they don't quite have the shooting efficiency necessary to clear the majority of the board really quickly. Having no melee at all certainly doesn't help, but there's plenty of armies in 9th edition that do absolutely fine without relying on melee to any great extent. The Adeptus Mechanicus and the Freebooter Orcs both can make lists that have almost no melee in them, and still be so strong that they're kind of oppressive. In general, the Tau playstyle I would say is a fair bit more interesting than it was, though it does really feel like you're locked into one build. Almost every single list that I see uses the Farsight Enclaves at least to some extent. Take a massive unit of battlesuits, make them hit on 3s and allow them to fall back and shoot with Farsight, layer them with stratagems and buffs, and you've got a fairly decent core for the army. Back that up with the Riptide with the amplified ion accelerator that does a ton of damage, score some objectives with breaches and devilfish, and then have a few fast or support units to run around and maybe provide some marker lights. Some very good players have managed to make this work, but it certainly struggles against the strongest things in 9th. It'll be interesting to see whether the Enclaves still remain the go-to playstyle in the new Codex, or whether some of the other things break through. So what sort of things might we see in the new book then? First up, I think a power boost is pretty much guaranteed at this point. Games Workshop seems to have deliberately designed it so that every single 9th edition codex is a massive power ramp up for the given army. It is a design philosophy that makes it quite hard on any armies that don't have their book yet, but at least when it does come out, it's a significant event, and it's not going to make your army worse. I strongly suspect that they'll be looking at virtually every single stat line and weapon profile in the book. I'm sure in line to AdMech, their shooting is going to be getting far more fierce. I'd expect some buffs to things like the pulse rifle. I wouldn't be surprised to see that get something like AP-1, and I think that they're likely to amp up the plasma rifle a bit, which has always been a bit underwhelming with its single damage. Tau don't really do all that much in 40k, they basically are the shooting faction, and to have their shooting be a little bit underwhelming is kind of sad. I think they certainly deserve to have some of the best shooting in the game, but hopefully in a way that promotes a little bit of engagement, moving around the board as opposed to just sitting back in a big castle and deleting things. I'd strongly expect to see the Tau Sept rules heavily rewritten. Ever since the book dropped, they were really quite badly balanced. Throughout most of 8th, almost every single list was built around the Tau Sept. Massive Overwatch and Shadowstorm re-rolls was a big draw, with Farside Enclaves being really quite interesting since the Greater Good book came out. Beyond those two, and maybe Viola, there isn't really all that much to draw you to the rest of them in my opinion. It'd be quite nice if you could maybe promote a few different Tau playstyles by making some of the other ones interesting and maybe push you to take different units. I strongly suspect that the signature systems that came out in the Greater Good book will be a points cost upgrade now, rather than paid for in a command point or two. That seems to have been the trend from the Psychic Awakening books, things like the Orc custom jobs that cost command points going to cost regular points instead. Hopefully they remain good. I wouldn't be too surprised if they maybe made things like the Amplified Ion Accelerator a bit less of an auto-include, but hopefully they can buff some of the weaker ones as well. One thing that they confirmed in the article is that the new Pathfinder equipment will be getting some new rules. The new models have alternate heads and things like scoped rail rifles or attachments for some of their pulse carbines. It's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be reflected. I perhaps wouldn't expect them to be massively game-changing pieces of equipment, but it's always fun to have the option to take or leave a few other bits of nice kit in the unit. And I'm going to guess that they might get a similar sort of forward deployment rule to things like Drakari Mandrakes or the AdMech Sicarians, as opposed to the pre-game move that they normally get. Otherwise, there'll certainly be some other things that we know. They'll be getting Crusade rules just like everyone else. That should make that far more interesting for the Tau. And they'll have their own set of secondary objectives, which could certainly also push them to be a little bit more competitive, having better choices for what to take. So let me know what you think is coming down in the comments below. Are you Generals of the Greater Good looking forward to a new codex? And what sort of things would you like to see? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly bring any more news of the Tau book once it comes out, and I'll review the codex in full once we have full details. I'm sure Games Workshop will drop a few previews here and there before then though. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel and you'd like to help support, I'd just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.